Like Me Without You?
Maybe, yeah, maybe like Me Without You.
What about if it
It'll
was
be
You
me.
Without You?
Well, if it was You Without You, then are we talking about you or a collective you?
And that's right, ladies and gentlemen, the cure for the migraine headache is Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Buddy.
Yo! And we're live.
And you are in for a double feature treat. I'm not going to say it's a science fiction double feature, but if it was, well, we all know what we'd be into. Buddy, you're back. What's going on?
Hey, not much. Just hanging out, listening to metal. Well, maybe not necessarily this week. Taking a bit of a detour this week with a little bit of rock and a little bit of industrial.
So you are about to sell me on a band that you will not shut up about.
Yes.
In true Buddy fashion,
Yes.
It's the greatest thing ever.
I've been really into this band called Death Therapy. And before we get to talking about them too much, Joe, why don't you tell them at least like what's going on with this show? Because it's a little bit different than any previous show we've done.
Everybody caught episode 8. We all know Dan had a last minute. He had to run out of town. So he decided that he was going to let me and Buddy attempt to answer a question that we have been trying to figure out since we started doing this podcast. It has come up in conversation, Buddy. How do we talk about a band's discography for all of those bands that only have one record?
Yes. What do we do about that?
I mean, you can talk about the entire band. You can talk about the album, but then it kind of becomes more of an album review than it does become a discussion about the band's discography. The group that we're going to try to answer this question with is one of my favorite bands, Atomship, formerly known as Watership Down, and even known as Atomship Down for a very short period of time. Before we get too deep into it, I'm going to say, for all those people that are downloading this show, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to every show. We are on Google Play. We are in iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We are on TuneIn Radio. So if you have an Amazon Echo product, you can tell it to play the latest episode of Discography Discussion, and it will play it. We are also on YouTube. We stream live every time we record, almost every time we record.
Because this one isn't.
We are on Facebook at Discography Discussion. We are on Twitter at Discuss Metal. And you can find everything that we do at discussmetal.com.
And there we go. So part of what makes this different is that one of the things that we talked about was that we said, okay, well, if we have one album that we're going to talk about, maybe instead of just doing one album, we do more than one band. And so that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to take a brand new band, Death Therapy. Their record just released, I think maybe a couple months ago. And then Atomship, who their record was released back in 2004. And so we've had a long time to listen to this band and, digest this particular album.
And this album's title is The Crash of 47. A little bit of a history lesson about Atomship is when they were created at their inception, they were called Watership Down. The main songwriters would have been Chad Kent, the drummer, Nathan Slade, the guitarist, and Derek Pardo. I hope I'm saying his name right. And The Crash of 47 is one of my examples of a perfect album. A perfect album to me is not 100% everything I want to hear from start to finish. It can fall short in a couple places, but it is an album that you put in and you let play. From the beginning till the end, you don't want to skip. You couldn't if you wanted to skip. Another example of that for me would be the album Commencement by Deadsy. It's an almost perfect record. This album, it's not metal strictly in the thrash metal sense of we're going to go balls to the wall. It's more of a journey. It's got some atmospheric overtones.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rock album.
It's
but
rock.
There's definitely some pretty heavy parts in places. Um,
Very trippy lyrics.
Yes.
Big time trippy. And you can tell that when you name your band Watership Down, and for those that don't know what Watership Down is, it's a book about animals, mostly rabbits, wanting to kill each other.
Yeah.
Because Pompoko wasn't enough.
Yeah. And I mean, there's even a...
Can we start a band called Pompoko? Can we do that?
Maybe.
I don't know if Dan would let us do that.
No, probably not. There's even one of my favorite songs on the album. It's actually like the second track, which is called Mothra, which if you're a Godzilla fan, then you obviously know that as the giant flying moth that Godzilla sometimes is a friend of, and sometimes he fights. But that's probably the heaviest part on the record is at the end of that song, where they just go nuts on everything. And you hear some double bass in a rock album that you didn't think you would ever hear.
I just skipped on to Mothra. It's got a solid minute and a half of atmosphere at the very beginning of just I'm going to call it diddling because I like the word diddle. And it takes a minute and a half for just this very low tone, and the actual lead vocalist on this album is Joey Culver. Derek Pardo, he had problems with anxiety is the extent of the story that has been told to the public, and he just could not record in the studio. He couldn't tour, so they hired Joey Culver to come in, and all the music on this album has those three, Nathan Slade, Derek Pardo, and Chad Kent, as writing credits, except for the very last song, which has Culver credited as well. But it's Mothra, they said outright, we wrote this song to show everybody that we had the greatest drummer in the world. And you can tell the term interdependence comes to mind. I'm going to jump ahead for Buddy because, it goes up, it goes down.
I mean,
the lyrics aren't necessarily pushing you in one direction or the other, but then you get all this atmosphere.
Are like 3 lines long.
Yeah, it's you can tell if this song was written to show off the drummer, because it shows off the drummer. And it's coming up here just momentarily. If you think your band is the fastest double bass in the world, well.
Oh, I just love that.
Chad Kent, ladies and gentlemen. If I ever have the opportunity to meet that man, I will shake his hand and his foot. Yeah.
When I was listening to this album for preparation, I probably replayed this song a bunch of times before I moved on.
Yeah, it's not the biggest song on the record for me, but again, this is a near perfect album. I can't just pick one. I've got to let it go.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you put in and you just let play through. And for me, like, I'm a web developer, so I sometimes need that stuff that will just kind of fit in the background, and it has moments where it just kind of lulls out in the background and you can just work to it, and other moments, like for me, Mothra, it just jumps in your face and you've got to acknowledge it. It's definitely sad that these guys are no longer around.
The band still exists. They've hit some troubles and tribulations, but they've never truly gone away.
Oh, really?
They dropped off the map after Joey Culver left, and they decided they wanted to be independent again. And they took on the name Atomship Down as a reference to their first name, and then eventually just went back straight to Watership Down. And they kind of have a discography, at least in my eyes, because they have a lot of singles and one-offs that came after this. But then I listen to these songs, and I'm thinking, man, they must have just been playing this stuff for years before they finally had an opportunity to put it on tape.
Yeah.
Derek Pardo said that Nathan Slade was the most talented guitar player that anyone had ever worked with. And I listened to this, and I can't tie it down. I can't say that this is progressive. One person tried to say this was new metal, and I think I actually punched him in the teeth.
Yeah, this is definitely not metal. It's got some influence there in a couple of places, but I mean, this is just a good, solid rock album.
It has like a Louisiana swagger to it. Like this song, Dragonfly, just we're in 3/4 because we decided we wanted to be. The next track is called Pencil Fight, which was their single that they had. And it's trying to get you hyped up as much as this band can get you hyped up, but the musicianship is just so solid. The guitar is not overly complex. The lyrics are calm, well thought out. It's the melody. I've heard the versions of these songs that have Derek Pardo singing them, and I personally like them. I know if Dan was here, he would tell you that he is not a fan of Watership Down, but Atomship is amazing, and I do like these songs better. I think the tone of voice, and this is what you get. It's just very solid.
And these aren't. I haven't heard any of the previous versions of these with the other singer. This is the only one I've heard. But I know for me, like, there's some people that probably would say, "Oh, well, some of these songs are timeless or whatever," and I'm like, well, like I get like Pencil Fight for me especially. I definitely get that feeling of this is 2003, this is 2004. Hearing that sound of it. I don't know what it is. I can just kind of place it because it gives. Maybe it's because I feel like Pencil Fight gives me that Three Doors Down kind of sound.
Yeah, it sounds like a single from the early 2000s. I'll give you that one.
Yeah. So it's not my favorite on here, but it's still I like you said, I put this album in and I just kind of let it go. I don't really ever skip anything.
Withered sneaks up on you, and it's not a ballad in a ballad sense. Because when you listen to the lyrics, it seems the sun is still sleeping, and I'm feeling so lonely. There's a girl in my bedroom. Don't worry, she's not breathing.
She's not breathing. Yeah. Like,
what happened in that bedroom, Mr. Pardo?
It starts off as being like this, oh, hey.
I'm going to feel like a huge jerk if I find out that this was about somebody committing suicide.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Probably, that more likely than not, that's probably what it's going to end up being. But I always thought it was kind of funny how it started out being like this. Oh, it's kind of like this song. And then, oh, hey, don't worry, she's not breathing. What?
From that, it sneaks into Agent Orange, and this to me was always like some strange battle. Like, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the progressive aspects and the atmosphere, because we started off with Day of Days. We hung out at Mothra for a while, and then we fell into Dragonfly, Pencil Fight, and we're down in Withered territory. It takes us low. And this is why the album is perfect to me, because they're trying to build you back up. And they're just it's a demonstration of solid musicianship. It reminds me of Goblin, almost like that 70s progressive rock mentality of, just like Pink Floyd The Wall. We're trying to take you up and down. We're not just trying to hang out in one place, but we very timidly stay in one place. It tricks you. It tricks you into hanging out with it for 20 minutes.
That's the truth. Agent Orange is pretty good just because that always kind of that's the one that pops out, because I guess because of that, it gets into Pencil Fight and it just kind of starts to go down, and then Agent Orange kicks up, and that's when I start listening again. Like if I'm at work, that's when it pops on it for me again. Especially because that riff happens.
This band has a notorious tendency to end on a bang and leave you wanting more, which is partly why we start listening to the next song. I know if Dan was here, the first thing he would bring up would be Aliens. It's this trippy, like, really fast. It's in 5 or 7. I can't remember. I haven't counted it in a while. And it's just, I am the alien, wishing and hoping and praying that we are the aliens. And what is the point of this? I feel like they're trying to break it down, and then they do break it down at the very end, and then they stop. Again, Chad Kent, ladies and gentlemen, is better than your drummer.
Yeah, it is kind of unfortunate that there are some parts where they do something super awesome like that in Aliens, and then, yep, we're just going to not do that again. And you're like, come on, guys. You guys could be... I wish they were heavier than they were.
Many
times
song.
I listened to it.
Number one song on the album for me right here is Whitfield. I mean, if I'm thinking about Atomship and I put this album on and I want to listen to my favorite song, it drops on track 9.
It's funny you say that because like when this song pops on, I usually skip it. This is probably the only one I skip on the album.
How could you
And it's
possibly skip Whitfield?
you know what it is? Like if you play that track back again, it's that first like set of guitar notes where with the dun, 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 dun. I don't know. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me for some reason.
Man, you better redeem yourself if you want to talk about death therapy later.
I will, and that's because
man.
we skipped one of the. Now this isn't like a fast song, but "Time for People," which is the track, like one or two before this.
Oh yeah.
Time for People is hilarious just because it's like this, it's kind of a softer song or whatever, but then it's, the chorus of this is, I found people killing time, so I found time for killing people. Which is what?
This album clearly, the lyrics were written by a psychopath. They'd have to be.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry,
The
Mr. Pardo, for saying that, but man, where were you, man, when you wrote these? I don't ever want to go there.
The lyrics are definitely probably one of the funnier and stranger, more enjoyable aspects of this album. For me at least, because I'm definitely, I started out as being like a dude who listened to rock and, like AC/DC and Metallica were my jams, but I was more of like a Black Album, load and reload guy. 'Cause I didn't get access to some of that stuff until a lot later in life, and so once I found metal, I kind of just went whole hog into it with, Nile and all that kind of stuff. So pulling myself back out and listening to some of this rock is also strange for me in a way sometimes. But it's a good. These tracks are just really fun to listen to.
They are musicians' songs. It's a rock version of a good jazz rhythm section. It's solid. It gets the job done. It innovates where it needs to, and it shows off when it can.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you get the opportunity, and you get your copy of Atomship, The Crash of 47, put it on album repeat, and you tell me where the end of the record is, because I promise you will have at least listened to the first time through and at least 3 or 4 more songs before you say, wait a minute, I've already heard these, because it's like a big circle. And it's almost trippy and artsy enough for me to accuse them of doing that on purpose. You start off with Day of Days. By the time you get to the middle of the record, you're at Agent Orange. All the tension is in those 8th, 9th, and 10th track. Aliens, Whitfield, Friends. And then Plastic People is back in the same place as Time for People, as the same place as Dragonfly. It's at this strange, like, holding area of your attention. It doesn't take you high, it doesn't take you low, it just kind of holds on to you. And then it tricks you again because it falls back into Day of Days. I honestly don't know how many times I've listened to this album, but every time I hear it, I hear something I didn't hear before. A different guitar note, a pattern, something in the ambience, a note. But this album will make you feel good. Kind of like listening to Ghost. It'll make you feel good, and then when you actually think about it, you'll ask yourself, I don't think I'm supposed to be enjoying this as much as I am. But I am.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those albums where, we mentioned like I hate the fact that they do something awesome and then don't repeat it, but they do repeat it in the fact that I have to listen to the song again, because every time they do stuff like that, I just have to keep listening to it. So yeah, it's a good, solid album, and I'm sad that we didn't get more of it.
Yeah, definitely. After the band dropped their label, and Joey Culver was no longer in the band, and Derek Pardo came back and said, I think we can do music again. And if you look this band up online, you might have found them. You might have heard a couple songs like Come Back or 7 Days, I think was the other one. And they were really good songs, and they were talking about working on an album, and then Nathan Slade passed away.
Yeah.
And, that's not where their story ends. And that was 2009. I remember when it happened, and I was sad, number one, because knowing the band's story up to that point, I really believe that I would never hear from them again. And apparently they still technically exist. They do have a new guitarist. Chad Kent is pretty active on YouTube and places on social media, and he's a working drummer. Look that guy up if you want to see talent, raw talent, the kind of talent like that kid you knew in high school who you always wanted to be, Rob Cartwright. And you'll be impressed by everything that you see. And yeah, we didn't get much, but what we got was really, really good, and I'm glad I have it.
Yeah.
Other bands I can't say that about.
Yeah, that's true. So definitely, if you get a chance, if you got a subscription to Apple Music or Spotify or whatever, just pull it up and give it a listen. I don't think you'll regret it, especially a couple of the songs like Mothra and for Joe, I'll say Whitfield, but I would skip it.
The Doomhammer has been dropped.
Speaking of hammers.
So, buddy, tell me about Death Therapy.
So, Death Therapy. These guys come from one of my favorite bands. There was a band back in 2004 that came out with an album called Terminate Damnation, and that band was called Becoming Archetype. And these dudes were like super heavy, like, I don't know if you'd call them just straight metal, but it had that more metalcore sound, but very much more on the metal side of the fence here. But they were super awesome, and they came out with like 4 albums, and then the lead singer, who was also the bassist, quit, and hadn't heard from him for since then. And just toward the end of last year, he pops up with this side project that he put together, where he got a rock drummer. He specifically calls that fact out. If you ever listen to any interviews with him, because he wanted to have a different sort of sound, and he took his bass and put it through bass pedal, and then he takes that output and puts it through a guitar pedal, and then he puts it through like a bunch of different stacks in between as well, to give it this interesting sound where it's just bass and guitar, and there's not really ever any guitar, or bass and drums. I'm sorry, bass and drums, and there's not really ever any guitar on the album, which of course, because he wanted to make an industrial album, he's got some programming and things on that nature. So his first song that he comes out with is The Lie, which is track 3 on the record. And that instantly grabbed my attention because it's this thing I'd been looking for, which was this, I really like industrial electronica kind of stuff, but as soon as any lyrics pop in, I'm not really like a fan of it. But he was doing depth vocals throughout this song, so I was super pumped that they were going to be this like electronica infused death metal going on, and so that made me super excited. And so I kind of waited and didn't really listen to anything else that came out. I just kind of kept spinning that one track and waited for this album to drop, and it finally came out back in February, and it's 10 songs, 8 of which actually have some sort of lyrics, because the 9th and 10th track, which are called the Belmont Family Curse, those are actually just a ode to Castlevania.
It definitely shows.
Yeah, there's definitely some Nintendo core going on in there. So I guess before I kind of talk about what I thought about this particular album, and so that's something where it came from. Joe, why don't you go ahead and start it out? What did you think being brand new to hearing this week?
Buddy, what the hell, man? Seriously. I put this record in, and my first word was, "Hello, 9 Inch Nails."
Yes.
And then I kept listening, and I said, "Hello, Showbread." And then I kept listening, and I said, "Hello, Project 86." And then I kept listening, and I said, "Who let Marilyn Manson in the room?"
Oh, I know.
After all of that, the Belmont Family Curse starts, and I said, "Hello, Nintendo, I missed you." And then I listened to it again. It tricked me, just like we were saying about Atomship. I put it on, I was listening to it, and it looped twice in my headphones, and I did not realize it. And I started catching. I think it wasn't The Lie. It was Self Mine Dead.
Oh yeah,
And then I
'cause that's a
realized
very
why
particular
I
song.
heard Andrew Schwab's voice, because Andrew Schwab is on this song.
Which, funny, that is the only in his 20-year career being in a band. That's the only guest vocals he's ever done.
So that's my review.
Yeah, so that's good to hear that you say that you really enjoyed it, because as somebody who was anticipating this album, I really like it, but I've got two hangups with it.
Yeah, what are those?
All right, so part of my problem here is that uh, it's too short, which is a good thing to have. Like it's a bit too short. I just want more. Which, I mean, that's a complaint with most anybody's record. But my other big thing is that the first single that they released was "The Lie," and I think, in my opinion, "The Lie" is the best song on the record. It also doesn't really sound like anything else on the record. And that's kind of a drawback for me, because I felt like I was going to start listening to something different than what I got.
Well, that's the great
And
thing about anticipation. You never know what you're going to get until you get it.
Yeah.
But I'm
So
not
it's
going to lie to
interesting
you.
to hear.
I would not have put The Lie out first. That would have not have been my debut single.
Yeah, I think putting out "The Lie" was a mistake. That would have probably been like the second or third single that I think should have came out. Because it's not representative of the entire record.
That's why I don't agree, because if that song got your attention, it did its job.
That is true, but it almost feels like a bait and switch. But I still like the rest of the record. I just wanted more of that particular track, and it just doesn't quite exist in the same form in there. But
there are places on
really
here where I say this is why you don't let the bass player write the music. At the same time, it all works for exactly what it is. I never get the impression that he's doing a trick just for the sake of doing the trick. I feel like he sat down and really figured this stuff out and created good sounding riffs, good sounding songs. He thought about his lyrics. I think "Wake Me When I'm Dead" might be my top track on here. But I've only listened to this album twice, and my opinion could very well change.
Yeah. It's a really solid album. I have the same thing that happens with me is I don't notice that the album's over until track 10, when the Nintendo core comes in. It just flows really well, and I can listen to it over and over again. So because I've let go of the whole fact that the album doesn't sound like the third track, which is fine, because it is a solid album and I love how it sounds. It's just got a different type of sound than anything else that I've heard before. Probably because of the fact of how he's got his setup working. I mean, there's rarely a guitar in there, which I had no idea until I heard an interview with him say that there was no guitar. That it's just all bass and programming and drums. Yeah.
I would almost accuse, when I first listened to it, knowing that it was all bass, my thought was I could accuse you of having keys in a few places if I didn't know that bass synthesizers existed.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start programming, I can start accusing you of it a little more. But I am not unhappy with it. It's the kind of thing I want to see played live by, 3 or 4 dudes on stage. Hello, Spinal Tap. Because that'd be a lot of bass players.
Yeah. When they play live, he said that, it just basically his most valuable musician is his iPad. Because if the iPad goes down, they don't really have much of their stuff going on because of all the electronic stuff that the iPad.
I don't know if I'm less offended or more offended by that than I would have been if he had said my laptop, because we talked about unmentionables on the Korn episode.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably because I don't think he does his programming on his iPad, but he stores his tracks there. Because I mean, basically, from what I gather, like he's got loops going, and then him and the drummer play to those loops.
Yeah, it's common.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. I like the album. I'm definitely looking forward to more of it. I hope it stays in that heavier direction because I really enjoy Jason Wisdom is the vocalist name. I really enjoy his death vocals because he was so good at them in Becoming the Archetype, and it feels like he hasn't missed a beat when he does it on this album, and it just leaves you wanting more every time.
I mean, I'm listening to the Slow Dance with Death right now. This is going to sound mean, but if you listen to too much Nine Inch Nails, you get caught by the fact that Nine Inch Nails is a lot of atmosphere. We all remember Closer, we all remember March of the Pigs, but we also remember Hurt, and a lot of Nine Inch Nails sounds like that. This sounds like, well, honestly, what I said. This sounds like you threw Nine Inch Nails in a blender with some Showbread, some Project 86, and again, Marilyn Manson, and just took out what came out of it and then threw away the remains. Because it's clever, but it's not clever for clever's sake. It's clever, it's good. I enjoy listening to it. What else you got if this is what you're giving me? That's what I have to say.
Yeah. It was a good surprise, that's for sure. So.
You got anything else to say about Death Therapy?
I don't. I just want more of it. I still listen to The Lie over and over again. That's still my favorite. Self Mind Dead, track 2, The Lie, track 3, Slow Dance with Death, track 6. Those are probably my big favorites out of the whole album. How about you, Joe?
Like I said, Slow Dance with Death. Actually, I'm going to change what I said because I'm going to go with Prodigal as my number 1. But again, I've only listened to it twice. It's a very solid album. Keep listening to it. Atomship, Crash 47, very solid. And I dare say I don't have to ask you what your album of the week is, but I will. What is your album of the week, buddy?
Yep. Well, funny enough, it is not Death Therapy, The Storm Before the Calm. It is The Crash of 47 by Atomship, because I've been listening to it.
I reached him.
But when I've not been listening to that, I've been listening to Annihilation of the Wicked.
I have a confession to make. I have been listening to Meliora by Ghost on repeat.
I have not heard anything by Ghost before.
And I'm going to say that is my album of the week. I'm also going to caution the listener and say that I am starting to feel that it is the most evil music ever written. Notice I did not say the heaviest. I said the most evil.
And what gives you that opinion?
I will save that for a discussion involving Ghost and at least 1 or 2 beers.
All right, sounds good.
Well, on that note, guys, thanks for listening this week. I know it's been different. It's been a change. We had to try some stuff because we had to go with what we had. But I need everybody to tune in live on Friday, March 14th. This is April 14th, where we will be having a discussion with the band American Standards. And we will catch you guys on Friday. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Thanks for doing this, man. We'll see you next time.
No problem, man. See ya.
This has been episode 9 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit DiscussMetal.com for all things Discography Discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com.